what do you think are some of the missteps or setbacks that you encountered along the way?
You know, and I try not to live with regrets, right? So I feel like everything is a learning opportunity to grow from. But so I think back to some of the things, knowing what I know now, how would I have done those differently? So a great example of that is when I went to Singapore. So when I got the Singapore assignment, it was actually a developmental assignment. So what that meant was I was asked to go over and take a job that was actually a level below the job I was currently doing, right? But there's no financial loss, like your grandfather in terms of your money, your finances, your stock options, all that kind of stuff. So there was no financial downside to it. And then anyone who's ever been on an expat assignment knows that it's also an opportunity to accumulate wealth. So there was no downside to that per se. However, knowing what I know now, I would have negotiated that. I would have said, listen, I'm willing to go, but we need to make the job scope bigger, or we need to do something different so that it wouldn't be a development assignment, right? And the second thing that happened while I was over there, so when I originally took that assignment in Singapore, it was to be the head of HR for Asia Pacific. And about 9 months in, we had a reorg, which we were notorious for doing. And in that reorg, we inherited Africa, Middle East, Russia, and the CIS countries, right? And so that was a scope growth. Now, at the time, I was the head of HR, so I made sure that all of my peers had a job evaluation process done to look at their jobs and to have them evaluated based on the new scope. And in many cases, it actually increased the level of the job. And in my mind, I was like, clearly, my boss is going to also then suggest that my job be reevaluated, right? And he was a wonderful man. He was a great sponsor, one of the best leaders I've ever worked for, but he was not perfect. He had a blind spot, and that was a blind spot. He didn't advocate or ask, well, Latasha, should your job be reevaluated? And at the time, my thinking was, it feels self-serving to ask for my job to be reevaluated, right? Like, I didn't really want to do that. And so when I think back on that, absolutely, I should have done that. I should have been my biggest advocate. Not that I was asking for more than I was entitled to, not that I was asking for something that was unreasonable, but learning how to hone your own voice, even when you're worried about the perception of it being a self-serving request.
Yeah.
Now, ultimately for me, it was actually a good thing, because that was actually one of the set of circumstances that actually helped me make the decision to move on.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. And it really resonates, right? A lot of times people don't feel like they need to advocate for themselves. They don't feel like they need to step in, especially if you get people of color and women and people that aren't used to just advocating on their own behalf. I don't know what you learned coming up, right? My parents used to always tell me, well, don't toot your own horn.
Yeah.
I'll also do that for you.
Yeah. And that's what you think. And a lot of us came up in the generation of put your head down, do the work. And it's funny, because I actually had this conversation with the CEO when I left. And I said, because he, and that was the thing, like people were so surprised when I switched companies. I had been there 20 years, had moved, 5 times with the company, including the international move, was on a texting basis with the outgoing CEO and the incoming, right? So like, why would you leave, when you have that kind of, establishment? And I told the CEO the incoming one, who I think very highly of, I said, for 20 years, I've lived by the motto of put your head down and work. Put your head down and work, and people will see the fruits of your labor. People will see the good work that you do, right? And I gave him 3 very specific examples of when I did that and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right? And so at that point, it was my responsibility to take my career in my own hands and make decisions that were best for me. No one else is, and I think people need to understand this. Corporations are made up of wonderful, good people. Yeah. But corporations have to do what's in the best interest of corporations, which means you as an individual need to do what's in the best interest of you.